Welcome, Jordan here. In today's video, we're going to talk about self-love for the modern man. And this is a topic I don't really see many people touching on, and I can understand why. We're going to get into that in this video. But when you look at most improvement content or anything related to bettering oneself, there's not a whole lot of talk in certain areas of the internet that are mainly focused on, masculinity or becoming a better man or whatever the case is, that talks about loving yourself as a man. Now, this is a journey. Don't get me wrong, and I'm on the journey like anybody else. I have not arrived at some magical place, but I've made some significant progress over the last couple of years, and I'd like to share some of the things I've learned with you in this video, as well as what I'm seeing with clients that I work with on a more one-to-one basis. The fascinating thing about this is that I, like anybody else, like any other man, fell into the trap of going down the rabbit hole of self-improvement content. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with self-improvement content. If anything, it's actually a very positive thing. It's just that it can be portrayed in a very negative way. And I don't like I'm using positive and negative there very lightly because, at the end of the day, everything is neutral. We're just kind of labeling these things in this case. But a lot of improvement content out there makes a lot of people feel worse instead of actually feeling more empowered or better about themselves. Now, there's a narrative also out there as well that will tell you that if you don't feel bad about your current life or you feel, very terrible about who you are as a human being, then you will never change and you will never, make progress. And, that may be true for some people. That may be true for people who are buying into that narrative. But we have to understand as well that a lot of the time, these are narratives and stories and beliefs that we just take on from watching people online, from people that are sharing a certain message. And if those people have significant influence and significant amount of followers or subscribers or whatever the case is, then naturally, if you're not someone who is fully confident within yourself and you're a young guy maybe and you're looking up to people, then you're going to take on how they view the world and make your own version of it within yourself, just borrowing their point of view. And that can be dangerous if it's a point of view that's not really going to serve you in the long-term scheme of things. Because when I found myself falling down the rabbit hole of self-improvement, I had actually lived many years before even discovering this type of content where my life was pretty great. Like I was having a great social life. Yeah, I was young and I was probably drinking way too much alcohol than I should have, but I was having fun and I was living life in a way that was just perfect for what was going on in my life at the time. I was dating, I was playing sports, I was just living life. I wasn't really on YouTube that much. And I'm not really sure why that was. I just never really came across the whole idea of self-improvement until actually my mid-20s. And that's when I was really starting my whole online business. And I just came across it. And I fell down the rabbit hole of, looking at some of this content and looking at some of the creators there. And I thought it was cool. The message was overly positive. It's like improve yourself, get better. But as I got deeper into understanding more about myself and went on a bit more of a spiritual journey and, looked at how can I raise in my level of consciousness and, become more aware. And I started to do meditation quite a bit. I started to develop a deeper awareness around who I was. And I started to feel very disempowered and also very controlled almost or victimized when I was watching certain self-improvement content because it actually made me feel worse about my situation than it did, better the situation, right? And I think a lot of that comes from the lack of love that comes from the person sharing the message or just overall the idea that you have to feel terrible about yourself to make a change. And yeah, I mean, in some cases, that can be true for sure. I'm not saying that it's wrong or right. I'm really not here to argue with anybody. It's more just the case of when we remove any idea around loving ourselves or we remove the idea of accepting yourself for who you are and coming from a higher state of consciousness when it comes to your journey as a human being and understanding what that really entails, then we can get very misled and pulled in the wrong direction. But who knows? That may be just the perfect part of your journey that actually leads you to learning to love yourself on a deeper level. So who knows? None of it's right or wrong. It's all just happening. So, this is just a discussion more than anything else. But when it comes to self-love, I've noticed that many of the guys who I work with have gone down the rabbit hole of self-improvement at some point or another, and they've adopted certain ideologies and they've adopted certain things into their life. And some of it was helpful for a certain amount of time until it became the thing that actually was causing more harm than it actually was any good. And that, from what I've seen, came from the lack of conversation around what it means to actually truly love yourself as a man. Because if we can't truly love ourselves as men, like as in I can say that, hey, I love myself, at least to a degree. I'm on the journey like anybody else. And, there's still things I'm learning about myself that I'm getting to know, like anybody else. And when we can say that about ourselves, it really puts us in a state where we can heal and really transcend the need to constantly improve oneself. Because the idea of improvement, especially when you're coming from the basis of spirituality, it makes no sense to improve yourself because you're already whole who you are. You're already the one you've been looking for. You're already it. But we have forgotten who we are. And that's part of the human experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's not positive or negative. But we have forgotten who we are. So making ourselves feel worse doesn't help that. Doesn't help us remember who we are. But loving the aspects of yourself that may feel unloved or feel unlovable is actually one of the most powerful things that you can do for your own energetic state and how you show up within the world. And there's so many different ways that we can spin this conversation, but we'll touch on a couple of different areas. When it comes to loving yourself, what we're really doing is we're loving the parts of ourselves that may not have been loved as a child. Because as kids growing up, we have many different experiences throughout our life where we felt a sense of being unworthy or unloved by potentially parents or potentially the people around us, our environment, social circle, all of these different things. And, that's basically the childlike version of you going through some experience, right? Whether it was significant or whether it was just getting dismissed by a parent. And in that moment or in those experiences, we make an unconscious decision that we are unlovable. And that ingrains the belief within our mind that we are not worthy of love because it was dismissed or we had an experience where we felt like it was the opposite as a child. And we don't understand how to navigate those things as a child. So in those moments, we make an unconscious decision and we start to form the belief that I am not lovable. And in those times, that's not something that just goes away. That's not something that just disappears over time. It gets forgotten about for sure, consciously, but subconsciously that's been ingrained over time. And people refer to this as trauma. I like it can be referred to that for sure. But it's also just something that is a natural part of the human experience as well. Because when we come into this world as a soul in this human body and we're going through life, we are here to learn specific lessons. My belief around this is that we're here to learn specific lessons based on the character that we chose to be within this lifetime. And for us to learn certain lessons, one of the biggest lessons that you can learn is to love yourself and love others, but not conditionally, unconditionally. Right? Which is the big difference there. And when we experience something as a child where we are dismissed or we have an experience where we feel like we are not loved or we are only loved if we do X, Y, and Z, that is conditional love. And conditional love is conditional, right? It's like if you do this or if you are this or if you be this way or if you say this or if you act this way, then you're loved. Then I will love you. That's what we kind of pick up. And when we experience those things, we have to experience those things to understand what it means to actually unconditionally love in the first place. Because without the contrast, we wouldn't understand how to navigate it. So we have to experience conditional love to actually experience unconditional love, which is essentially where we're trying to aim for unconditional love for oneself, but also unconditional love for others as well in this human journey experience that we have. So that brings us to understand that, okay, all the experiences that we had and those unconscious decisions that we made as a kid, they were part of the journey, right? So we don't have to look back on it with anger. We can actually look back on it with seeing that there's a lesson there. There's something here for us to grow. into and learn from. And that's the beauty of life, because these things that are perceived to be very painful in our life, in some cases, always have a gift attached to it as well. And that's the beautiful universal law of polarity within the universe, that everything is equally balanced, right? Every experience, every thought, every idea, it has both positives and negatives in it. And that is a really profound thing when you really see it across different areas of your life. So when it comes to loving oneself, it's going back into those moments where we felt unloved, where we felt like we weren't worthy, where we felt like we weren't enough, and going back and reframing some of these things, whether that's through meditation or, breath work or visualization, or simply just sitting with the fact that there's been moments there where we felt a sense of inadequacy because of maybe something that happened growing up. Again, it's very nuanced for everybody, so I can't talk about specific examples, but there is moments for everybody who has in different times in our life. So going back in our mind and just like reframing some of those things, reparenting yourself is another way to look at it. Doing inner child work is another way to look at it. And what's fascinating about this is that when you go back and you reframe some of those things, you naturally raise up in your energetic state of being, your energetic frequency and vibration. And this is because you release the density and the energy that's been attached to those unconscious moments where we made those decisions that we weren't lovable. And when we let go of those things, right, which is it's a journey, it's a process, don't get me wrong. When we let go of those things, though, we naturally rise. A nice analogy I like to use for this is like we tend to think that working harder or constantly seeking improvement is the way to better ourselves. But a lot of the time it can feel like we are, doing our best to pump hot air into a hot air balloon. And no matter how hard we try, we're pumping this air into the hot air balloon, but we're kind of bobbling along the ground a little bit. It's not really taking off. When really, all we got to do is stop pumping so much air into it and start to cut the sandbags at the side of the basket so that we can naturally just rise. Just naturally, because we're naturally here to evolve and expand anyway. So cutting the sandbags is going back and into those moments and learning to love yourself in different ways, And it's not just the inner child work. It's really just coming back to those quirks that you have, those things that you feel like you're a little bit embarrassed about, those things that you do that you're kind of afraid to say around certain people. All of these different things make up who you are, and that's beautiful. Learning to love those parts of yourself is actually really important as well, because that's when you can fully embody your authentic self. And when you embody your authentic self, you're magnetic. Like, you're magnetic to be around, because we can sense in other people when someone's being authentic within themselves. And, again, like I said, it's a journey, but we can feel that. And you'll bring the right people around you, and you'll attract the right relationships into your life that way, and the right things that are right for you because of who you're being. I find that there's a lot of friction in, achieving things when we are trying to achieve things that are just not really meant for us, or we set goals that someone else thinks that we should have had. And then we pursue these things in the hopes that it's going to bring us the feeling, but the feeling is actually the feeling of love within ourselves. So the external achievement is the pursuit of hoping that we achieve the feeling by achieving the goal. But if you've ever achieved a goal in your life, or a big milestone in any way, shape, or form, you'll know that doesn't deliver the way you think it should. And that's a big thing to realize. So, there's many massive companies, or many entrepreneurs, or many people who are just out there building in the hopes that they feel a certain way about themselves in the achievement of goals. Now, that's not everybody. And I'm not saying that it's better or worse or right or wrong for anyone, but there is some people out there, and I've chatted to many of them. They're hoping that the achievement of the goal will help them feel a certain way about themselves. But many of them, especially the men that I work with, they come back and they realize that those goals didn't mean anything, And I think, that may be something you have to realize for yourself. That's totally fine. We're all on our own journey here, so there's no right or wrong. And that's an interesting thing to experience, because, not that goals aren't good. Like, goals are great, and hitting milestones is great, and being able to provide for your family is amazing, and creating a great life for yourself. I'm totally all about that. I'm totally about building a big vision for yourself and stepping into a new version of you, right? Who's more authentic, which is really like, we're stepping into a new version, but we're really just pulling back the layers so we can actually just truly be ourselves authentically. That's really what it is. That's what the whole identity shift is about. It sounds like we're going into a new version, but we're really just going into the version of us that's actually true, which is the identity shift. And with all that being said, like the achievement of goals is an amazing part of life, right? And I think it's incredible to challenge yourself, and it's incredible to strive for more and to believe that you're capable of more and to achieve those things. But there's two different fuel sources that you can do that from. There's one on one side, which is more of like, I'm trying to prove myself. I'm trying to seek validation that maybe I didn't receive as a kid growing up. There's a part of me that feels unloved or insecure, and I want to prove myself and achieve these things so that I can feel better about myself. That's one fuel source. That's how many people operate. And I see this a lot in the self-improvement space, whereas it's constantly like, I have to look bigger in the gym. I have to, get with all of these different girls. I have to go off and to make all of this money. And it's all coming from a place of like, I need validation, right? And it's easy to see through that a lot of the time. But there's also another fuel source. There's another fuel source out there, which is more of like, you are deeply in tune with yourself. You know yourself to a very deep level, and you love yourself, at least to a degree, right? And you're on that journey of mastery with that. That can also be a fuel source. And then instead of being driven by fear and insecurity, you're pulled by a vision or a mission or a purpose, or maybe none of those things. Maybe it's just to love yourself even more deeply by challenging yourself and then seeing what you're capable of. You see that there's subtle differences there. A simple way to look at this is that you can go to the gym because you're deeply insecure and want to look different, or you can go to the gym and take care of your body because you love who you are and you just want to better your body. Like, just two different fuel sources there. So I guess that's a more simple way to look at it. And ideally, I think over the next couple of years, what we'll see is a radical shift in the fuel sources that people will be using. But that will, cause its own complications because, things that have maybe worked for people in the past may not work anymore, in terms of like using those fuel sources. Because as you go on the journey of learning to love yourself and to heal the parts of you that may feel wounded or unlovable or unworthy, when you do that work within yourself, your fuel source will naturally shift. Your fuel source will naturally become more light and less heavy. And yes, it's still possible to achieve great things, but a lot of the time you won't actually feel like you need to. It's more of like, you want to do it because it feels purposeful, because it feels exciting, because it feels like a cool thing to do. And the things that you can get from it and the things that you can provide for your family from it as well is amazing. So you lean into it. But it's not coming from a deep place of like, I'm just trying to feel good about myself, because you can feel good about yourself without any of those things. I just think a lot of people fail to realize that, me included, for a very long time. So there's no judgment here. I'm on a journey like everybody else. So it's a fascinating thing to explore, these different fuel sources. And personally, what I've seen is that the more I've tapped into understanding who I am, going into the depths of my own soul and learning what it's like to love myself in every way, shape, and form, that has been something that has been far more enjoyable. And it gives life this sense of lightness, this sense of excitement that's not coming from a place of needing to prove myself or needing to be a certain way. And it's a fascinating shift that happens. And I'm still moving through it, of course, like anybody else, but it's an interesting one for sure. And I think the more that we can focus on deeply loving ourselves in whatever way that shows up, right? It's a journey. You can look at it from many different angles. And, even talking about some of these things, maybe even triggering for some people, because it almost sounds feminine for many men. And I totally get that. A lot of it's from the indoctrination of the content that's out there, the society we live in. Because it's not that we're just trying to sit around and do nothing and love ourselves. Like, yes, that's true to a degree. And it's like, at the same time, you're still going out there and you're moving towards something bigger, something better, creating a life for yourself, for your family in these different ways. It's just that you don't necessarily need to do that to feel better about yourself. It's more coming from a different fuel source. If we're looking at the fuel sources again, right? The need to go off and build something can come from either just wanting to do that just because it would be something that's going to help you become more valuable, become someone of, value. But it's like, that idea is is wrong in my opinion, right? Because it's like you're already valuable as a human being. You're not valuable just because you build something. But that's a difficult thing for many people to get their head around, because it's like we live in a world where it's like men are only valuable if you go off and you do this thing or you build this thing or you have this money and all that. And that can be true, especially if you have a family. But it's not the truth, you know? There's a difference between something being true but also not being true, because there is no full truth. We got to stop thinking in binaries where it's like this is the way and it's like the only way. It's just not true. There's always two sides to everything, and there's multiple ways that you can do everything. So the whole idea of you're only valuable if you build something, or if you're only valuable if you go off and you pursue this new life for yourself, is it's like a half truth, like everything. You know, it's like there's some truth to it. And yeah, it's cool. If you want to do that, great. If you don't, then that's fine too. You know, it's like you'll experience both the pros and the cons from both sides no matter what you do. So like it's just whatever you want to do at the end of the day. But we can also create and build from the place of just simply wanting to express what we feel the world needs at the time, what we feel like we're meant to do here. And this is the thing that I've tapped into more over the last couple of years than anything else. Like I feel like I'm meant to be here creating these videos. Like I don't really understand it. I don't really question it too much. But I know just from the experiences I've had throughout my life and the things I find, you know, very interesting and I always get curious about, is the stuff I talk about on this channel. And the more that I do, the more I like sharing it, right? And the way I've set up my business, yeah, it results in clients. But at the end of the day, it's not for that specific reason. You know, otherwise I would just follow everybody else and talk about all the different things that would go viral. And it's like, I don't care about any of that, right? I want some truth in my life. And therefore I want to bring at least the truth that I understand to you watching this video. That feels part of my mission, and I don't understand why. I just know that it is, so I don't question it. And then that's something that can allow me to create something in this world that I feel like is important. And that's all I need, right? And I think that's all we need at the end of the day, is to do something we feel is meaningful. And that can come from deeply understanding yourself, knowing yourself, and loving yourself in each and every way. And I think that men, a lot of the time, we need to talk more about these things, you know? And to still continue to challenge ourselves and still continue to build and grow and expand and execute and do all of these amazing things. But we can do it from a place of self-love. It doesn't have to be a place to need, it doesn't have to come from a place of needing validation from other people. It doesn't have to come from a place of ego. It doesn't have to come from a place of like, I need to be better than all of these people and therefore then I feel good, because that's a simple protection mechanism of the deep hurt or wounding that many men feel within their own heart. And that's, you know, not right or wrong or better or worse. It's just the way things have played out. But I think we're stepping into a whole new realm of, you know, what the term improvement would be considered as. I think we're stepping into a whole new world of men stepping into their power, but not from a place of insecurity, not from a place of ego, but from a place of self-love, awareness, and consciousness, to really show up as the divine masculine, the one who can love, the one who can hold space for his own emotions and for his own, you know, healing journey, but also at the same time execute and build and, you know, transform in that way as well, to, you know, build that within himself, but also just provide for his family, his children, and the generations to come, if that's what he chooses to do. Again, none of it is right or wrong. It's whatever that person chooses to do. But I think that there's a lot of room for that to become more part of the topics out there when it comes to improvement or development. I prefer the term self-development, right? Development is like a continuous progression of, you know, realizing your highest potential. Improvement sounds like you're kind of chasing this false arbitrary place where you arrive at, you know, making sure that you are fixing yourself in some way, shape, or form. But I'm telling you now, man, you don't need to be fixed. You're already valuable the way that you currently are. And you don't need to feel like you are insecure or less than anybody else or inferior, because you already have something to contribute. And the energy that you tap into when you start to understand that will still be something that can drive you. It just doesn't have to come from insecurity, but it's a journey. It's a journey to dissolve those things and to identify where they come from and why they're there and how to truly move through them and clear the energy that's behind it. Like it's a process, which is why I work with people on a one-to-one basis and in a group format with these different things, because it's a journey, right? It's a progressive journey over time. So yeah, I wanted to speak about this. I think it's really important. And I think we're going to see big shifts happening in the content that we see, in the businesses that are built over the next couple of years. Now, it's not going to be massive, I don't think, but it'll be small and subtle, and it'll be sustainable over time. And I think it'll be a really great place for many men to step into and understand that they don't need to prove themselves. They don't need to be in massive competition with everybody, because all of this is just separation. And anything in my mind that creates separation is ignoring the idea of oneness, that we are all connected, that God is within all of us, and that we are here with a given purpose, and we are here to heal, we are here to grow, we're here to transform, but not from a place of needing to improve and fix ourselves, but from a place of deeply understanding and knowing who we are, loving thyself, and going that path, which is the path of mastery, at least the way I see it. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you have any extra thoughts you want to add to this, feel free to drop it in the comments below. I would love to hear. But other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Good to be here.